Whilst we are waiting, I'm Moshe Milevsky. I'm going to try to do the presentation in Spanish. Although I was born in Canada, I live in Canada. My family was originally from Montevideo in Uruguay, so I learned a little bit of Spanish at home. I'm going to try to use it today. It's a challenge. I don't know whether to speak in Spanish or in English for me to be interpreted, or whether to do it in Spanish. And there are quite a few words that I won't know, so I took the decision to do it in Spanish. So I really do apologize if I use some words incorrectly or which I haven't correctly translated. The slides are going to be in Spanish, although I did write it in English. But last night when I was here, I said, yeah, I have to do the slides in Spanish as well. So thanks to Google Translate, I've got the slides in Spanish. And of course, if anything is wrong, it's not my fault, it's Google Translate. Before starting, I would like to, well, let's see if it's working. Yes, great, perfect. Thanks once again for inviting me here. Thank you particularly to Guillermo, who invited me. Anybody who has a successful career has to thank somebody, and I have to say thank you to Guillermo for inviting me, because without him I wouldn't be here, so thank you to him. And also he made a very interesting point, a very important point about the subject of Catholics and this idea of Max Weber, the Protestant spirit. We have Catholic countries and we can compare them with Protestant countries, and there is an interesting difference. And now you're going to hear from a Jew, which is the third one. And thanks for inviting me here. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, well, he left here in 1492. He was thrown out, so after 500 years or so, I've come back and I've got the chance to speak. And let's just hope that the Queen isn't annoyed. And I'm going to talk 30-40 minutes. I know that we're running a little bit late according to the schedule, so we'll try and catch up. I'm going to talk for around 45 minutes, and the first 20 minutes are not going to be new things. It's going to be ideas that we all know about, the same thing. And then the last part, the last 20 minutes, well, there I will put forward a new idea. So do just hang on to hear the new part. So we're going to be talking about the Newtonian physics of pensions, the basics of pensions. And I'm going to use this to be able to talk about what happens when the interest rate and the growth rate, the real rates, are very, very low. What's happening now? Well, we've got inflation going up, we've got interest rates going down. What happens with the pension system in that context, according to this model? Well, first of all, that's the first point. Secondly, I would like to talk about heterogeneity in terms of demographics and mortality. We know that, well, if I say there's somebody that lives for 100 years and there's somebody that lives for 70 years, we don't know what's going to happen, so we all have to save together. And we know that heterogeneity, no, for example, she's going to live for many, many years, he's not going to live for so long. But how does this affect the pension system, all of this issue of demographic and mortality, heterogeneity? And then communication. I think it's very important. When politicians above all, say things that are not logical. I mean, how can you do that? Well, it's because we are not communicating correctly. How can we communicate better? Well, this is a basic aspect. And I will finish with my main idea, for today, which is the definition of age. But you have to wait 20 minutes or so before we get to that. So first of all, what's the objective, or why do we save? I work with many students. I've been a professor for 20 years or so, and I have a course called Pensions and Retirement Planning. That's what it's called, Pensions and Retirement Planning. And it's very difficult to teach this to somebody who's 26. Imagine 23, 24 years old. They haven't got a job. They don't know what they want to do in life. Pensions, retirement. We're talking something 40 years away. So why would I want to think about it? And so you have to talk to them initiate the conversation in an exciting way to get them interested. So I start with this, with the financial life cycle. I say to people, look, to the students, I say, well, let's think. You've got a salary of $100, 100 pesos. That's your real salary, and you work for 40 years. That's your salary, and you don't save anything. Nobody is taking anything from your salary and saving it. There are no contributions. So then when you come to the age of 65, and we're going to say, well, you didn't save anything. So you have a pension which is zero. You have nothing. And let's say you've got 20 years of retirement, you're going to have nothing. That's not a good idea. And, well, they all say, yes, that's right. That's not a good idea, Professor. So we say, how much should we be saving then? What percentage should we save in order not to have that situation? To do this, we need to have an interest rate, some kind of results. Let's say it's 4.5%, 4.5%, and, well, afterwards we could talk about whether this is realistic. I mean, 4.5 nowadays, but anyway, let's just let it be a real rate of 4.5%. So I put the money aside and it grows by 4.5%. If I save, let's say 15%, my contribution rate will be 15% in this case. So that leaves me $85 or 85 pesos to consume. But if I save over 40 years with this interest rate, I reach my retirement age. What will I have? Well, I'll have a quality of life which is better than when I was working. Who would like this? I want a stable level. So 15% is too much in this case. Why? Because you have 85 after you save, and then you get to retirement and you've got 120 something. That's not what we want. So how can we calculate the percentage that you should save? This contribution rate that will take you to a stable rate, a flat rate right through to the end. Okay, well, we need the present value, which is a basic idea, and for what you're going to get for your pension and what you're saving over 40 years. It has to be exactly the same. And what comes out of that is that in order to maintain the level exactly the same, in this case, you would have to contribute 11%. If you contribute 11%, this means that your consumption is 89, because they take away 11, you keep 89, and when you get to retirement, you are also going to have 89. There'll be no change. That's a stable figure, that 11%, with a 4.5 interest rate. You save 11% of your salary, and you reach retirement, and you have 89. So my message here is that a retirement system, well, the idea is not to think about an amount, a lump sum when you retire. No, it's about thinking of maintaining a stable quality of life. You know, it's not a quantity. How much is in my bank account and I'm going to withdraw so much. No, you're going to maintain this stable level or not. That should be what we're talking about, maintaining the same level. Okay, I understand that. And then the students say, why can't I do this with the workers that we have right now? Why do I have to save 11 and put it into an individual account and wait 40 years and then use it? Why don't we do it so that the people who are working right now pay for the retirement of the ones who are retired? Right? So if I have 8 people who are working, the 8 who are working, they can contribute that 11 that I mentioned, so that 8 by 11 is approximately 89. And there I have my pension. Why do I need a system which involves me contributing to an account with this 8 by 11? It works. But here we have the rule of 8. If I have 8 workers, I can do this. So it's 89 divided by 11 is 8. So 8 workers can pay the pension of 1 retiree. Nobody would notice that. You think you have an account, but no. What you're doing is you're taking money from the workers and giving it to the retirees. But that can only work when we have that 8-to-1 ratio. I can do it. But if not, If I don't have 8, then the system isn't going to function. The question, and here we're thinking of students, we're not talking about you. You understand all of this, but students might ask, could this work? We're talking about students that know nothing about pensions. I mean, do we have 8 people working for each retiree? That's their question. So let's take a look around the world. There are some countries with many more who are working. Afghanistan is 21, so they can do the pay-go system. I don't know what system they have in Afghanistan, but they could do pay-go. Bahrain, Cameroon, Zambia, Jordan. I mean, in theory, they could do it. They could take money from the workers and give it to the retirees. How about these ones? Honduras, 12, but we don't know the situation in 10, 15 years' time. Paraguay, Mexico is closed. They're at 8.7 as things stand. And here we have these ones. Peru, Uruguay, Colombia, Chile. No, that system won't work. So, we can talk about technical things. We're talking about the people who are working, contributing, participating. What would we do with casual labor, the informal economy? But people say, why will a pay-go system not work? I mean, these are people that don't understand anything. I start with this story to explain that it's not going to work. A pay-go system, no matter how it's disguised, it will not work. When you have many people working, it's okay. But if that changes, it won't work. And that's Newtonian physics. It's just basics, basic logic. What happens with the real interest rate when that's falling? Well, that's 4.5. Here we're talking about the 4.5. Right now we have a problem around the world. The real interest rate, I mean, what we're talking about here is the nominal minus inflation is dropping. If inflation goes up, the real rate drops. We're going to look at some figures. The real risk-free, it's hard to say. I mean, what kind of risk? But here in Mexico, we have the interest rate 4.75, inflation rate 6. From a month ago, and so the real rate is minus 1.25. Uruguay, minus 2. Colombia, minus 2. What does this mean? Well, we don't have 4.5 according to what we saw before. We don't even have 0. We have a negative real rate. And in history, it's not always been the case, but if we look at Chile, it's minus. Peru, minus 3. It's not growing, it's falling, this real rate. If we look at other ones, and let's not even mention Venezuela, minus 1,900 approximately. So another reason why it cannot work, this system cannot work. And what's more, here we have the same information, but it's displayed in a different way. We've got negative real rates. This is another reason we need to focus on how to maintain a system that gives us stable pensions. If we come back to this mathematical model, we don't have 4.5. No, the rate is, let's say it's 2. A real rate of 2% because I've got assets, I've got bonds, I've got shares and stocks. Alternative assets, it's not negative. We're talking about a rate of 2, not 4, but 2. What happens with all of this? 11, is it enough? 11, is it enough to maintain this 89 at a stable rate? No, it won't be enough. And what's more, another point that I'm going to mention, well, what happens if I don't want to protect myself at the age of 85? I want to reach 90, 95. Some people live until they're 100. That 11%, is it enough? I mean, I say to the students, no, it's not going to be enough. So what happens if during that time there's a pandemic? I couldn't work, so I could not contribute. There was a withdrawal window, and I withdrew some money. That 11% is no longer enough. What's the percentage we need? Well, let's see. Let's change the figures. So here in this corner, we have 4.5%, and somebody who has contributed over 20 years. We know, well, I mean, you'll be over there, and there we have this 11. But if we look at the other extreme, the other situation, we have 1.5%, which is real, rate and the years of retirement, many more years of retirement, we're talking about much higher figures. And again, you cannot take away from those who are working. It's not enough to be able to finance the pensions of the retirees. So let's say, what happens if I don't work 40 years? Maybe I work for 30 years. Well, again, it won't work. So I work less, I live for longer, the interest rates, it all goes in the same direction. We need to save more, we would have to take more out of the system, we have to provision more. It's all in the same direction. We're not talking here about, we're not saying on the one hand we could do more, on the other hand less, we don't know who comes out winning, we don't know what happens. No, it's all pointing in the same direction. So the message, we're halfway along now. So the message here, a decline in both real interest rates and time in the labour force requires more savings for retirement. So the old rules have to change. How much do we have to save? I mean, if we had these rules back in the 80s and the 90s, so you think, well, in the long term, no, it has to change. Now, how does demographic change affect things? And this is particularly what's happening with COVID, with the pandemic. I'm going to ask you something, and in English we talk about audience participation. This is what we're going to do now. Let's think about the world as a whole. Are there more men or more women? Not in this room, I know. But in the world, in the whole world, more men, more women. 102 to 100. It's important. It's not just a trivial statistic. It's 102 to 100. 102, 100. Now, if I look at different countries and I look at the situation over time, what happens with that proportion? Here we have South Korea. 106 in the 90s. It moved up to 114 men for every 100 women. We have the case of Hong Kong, which had 114 in 2010. What I'm saying with this, well, these are countries, China, for example, that it's not dropped below here. It's never dropped. The countries go between 106, 107, 112, 120. More men than women. There are many reasons. We could talk about why, what's happening, but I'm not going to talk about that. What I would like to say is how that affects, or talk about how that affects the pension system. It's very interesting. There are many more men, but they're young. So between 0 and 50 years of age in the world, there are many more men than women, many more. But when you get to the age, retirement age, we have more women than men. And there are countries where it's incredible, this change in proportion. What do we have to do with pensions? Well, I'm going to say that the pension system is more for women than for men. This means that we're talking about a female issue. We're not talking about something for men. This is a female issue. Let's take a look. Let's look at people who are over 90 in the world. What's the proportion? We know that at all ages there are more men than women. But let's look at people who are over 90, and they are retired. In Pakistan, Malaysia, Kuwait, Jamaica, it's below 1. So there are still, although they are over 90, there are still more men than women. In red would represent equal. It's 1. But then if we come to Chile, Brazil, we have others in South America, that's above 1. And more interestingly would be these countries. Red line represents 1. If we look at South Korea, we're talking about 12 to 1, the rate. 12 to 1. It's an incredible proportion in Kazakhstan and the Philippines for those over 90. South Korea is a really interesting case. Women over 100 years old in 2009, And 2019, many, many, many more women than men. It's interesting. Where did all the men go in South Korea? It's interesting. Has anybody seen this Netflix series? That's where they all went. Why? Well, because life expectancy between men and women, there's this gap. A gap of 10 years, and in places even more. In the world as a whole, 4.5 years. What does that mean? That they live more. They live longer. So what do we need to do with pensions? What's the message? Well, retirement planning is more critical for women because they live longer and they will be the majority. It's a woman's issue. Communication, well, if you put it like that, you're going to get more respect and more attention. And I think that's very important. I like to say if we have a healthy woman, she can live 25 years. A retirement of 25 years. It could be 30, 35, or even 40 years of retirement, but it could be less. And when we're talking about a man, an unhealthy man, he has around 10 years, and it's likely, or it is possible, that the man would live longer than the woman, and that's what we can see here. But in general terms, if we look at life expectancy, the woman's going to live longer. Here, this is the idea of a lifelong income. The idea is to put it all together in order to have an insurance subsidy, as I like to call it, for the people who live very long time here. And so the ones, they're getting the money because some of them didn't live for so long. And that's what I like to call longevity insurance. That's the idea. And here I come to the most important point, my main idea. How can we convince workers today to sacrifice today and provision for retirement in the future? Because people are thinking about today, and with the pandemic, this is even worse. We know that life expectancy has dropped. This is from the Financial Times. It has fallen by 1 or 1.5 years because of the pandemic. We don't know what will happen in the future. It's very dangerous to be in a pensions conference and say we're living for this long or that long. Well, no, that's not what we're seeing. I mean, this could be temporary and it could bounce back tomorrow. But we need to be a bit more cautious. We have to be careful. We don't know for sure, and there is more uncertainty. What are you going to say to somebody who is looking at this and reading this? I mean, you have to save for your retirement. You're going to have 40 years of retirement. I mean, how am I going to think about things in 40 years' time? I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about today. How are you going to talk to somebody who's 65? You say you're 65. Look, you need to buy a lifelong income policy because you may live until you're 100. I mean, 100? I want to live now and today. So how can we communicate all of this? My last 10 minutes for my last idea. I'm going to change my tack a little bit. I'm not talking about pensions. The Wall Street Journey carried out a survey, and they asked the participants about their perfect or favorite age. You may be 20, 30, 40, 50, and looking back, which was the age that you really liked the best when you were 18? I didn't have a lot when I was 18. 18 wasn't so good for me. 25, I was a student doing my PhD. 30, 35. So they asked this question to thousands of retirees in the United States. Which age did you like the best? They were mainly asking people over 60. So what's your number? Think about that. The average age that they said was 50. So if you're 50 now, that's the best moment. It's just going downhill from now on. Women, it was a little bit lower, 48. Men, 52, but the average was 50. That's interesting for retirees to say that. Well, I was 50 a few years ago and I didn't feel too good. 40, okay. 50 was was a number that was really difficult for me. It really was. Turning 50 for me personally. So my wife gave me a strange present, and this is a test. It tests your real age. And this is what I'm going to talk about for the last 10 minutes. What are we talking about when we talk about our real age? This is a kit, and well, now with COVID, you'd understand how it works. You get this box, you receive it at home, and we have a phlebotomist, I think is the name. Well, anyway, you have to get the blood, and you send it off, and after 2 months, you get an analysis back. The results come back, and it's via email. And the email that I sent when I was 50, I sent off the trial, the sample, and I got this email back 2 months later, and it said, your chronological age is 50. And I was like, well, I know that. That's my birthday just recently, but your biological age was 42. And I thought, what does that mean? My biological age is 42. So I called them, and after being on hold for about an hour, I spoke with a statistician. They said, yes, yes. And I said, do you say that to everybody? Do you tell everybody they've got the age of 42? He said, no, sir. I've got a PhD from Stanford. That's what he said. No, we use telomeres. And we measure the telomeres, and not everybody has a biological age of 42. So some people were younger than 42? Was there? It said, yes, 35. Some people 35. But us have some older? Yes, some 60s, 65, 70. Really? Yes, we measure the biological age, and even if you're 50, chronologically speaking, it could be between 40 and 65. And really? He said, okay, well, if you want, do it next year, and you may be younger. You may be younger next year. Okay, they want my $400 every year, yes. I was fascinated by this. I began to investigate what they were doing. And this business of telomeres, there are other biomarkers that are being used, and what they look at is the correlation that they have with your age. And there's a Professor Elizabeth Blackburn. She's a professor in California. She received a Nobel Prize in physiology a few years ago because she discovered something related to these telomeres. And many other people in North America, I don't know whether it's reached Europe yet, but they are doing these tests, and they're saying, that's my age. Ronaldo, I know that you're familiar with him here in Spain. He did one of these tests before the World Championship, and he got the result of 23. 23, even though he's 30-something. And that said, and he said, that's why I'm playing so well, because I'm 23. I'm not 35 in my chronological age. I'm 23, really. Can you change your age? There was here a businessman who wanted to... Well, he was 69. He was a Dutch businessman. He did this test, and it said you're 20 years younger than that. And so what he wanted to do was to change his age. He said, I want to change my age. If I can change gender, why can't I change my age? I want to be 49. And he went to a judge. And the judge says, well, why do you want to reduce your age? He says, well, I want to reduce my age on the websites. And the judge said, well, look, you're not 49. I mean, 5 years, okay, but not 20. That's asking for too much. So think about what might happen. There's a company in South Korea. I'll finish in 5-10 minutes, and of course I have to finish. There's a company in South Korea, of course, that if you send off your information, and we're talking about blood, it's not your information on the web. It's your blood. They will then send you a report for each organ and its age. Each one has a different age. For example, they'll say your spleen. No, the speaker is wondering how to translate batho. It's spleen is 40. Your liver is 95. They take an average and they say you're 59. That's your average age. And so I found around 15 companies, startups, that are all doing this epigenetic age analysis, true age, biological age. They want to know your age, that people want to associate with their biological age and not their chronological age.
I'm not 52. I was told in my test that I'm 41. So don't talk to me as if I was 52. So imagine if your watch tells you that every day. Good morning, sir. Today you're 38. Tomorrow you eat something. No, there was a bad night. Today you're 49. So they start to think about it. You have two ages. Chronological age, that's just the number of times you turned around the sun. That has nothing to do with you. We're going to finish. What does this to do with the pension system? Back here you have your chronological age, that's easy to measure. Here we have biological age, and diagonally we have someone who's exactly his chronological age and biological age. The likelihood of this is 0. You can be below the line or above the line. What do you want to be? Above the line or below the line? You want to be below the line. I want to be, now I want to be biologically 40 when I'm 50. Who's going to reach that corner up there? Who's going to reach 95, 100? Those that are below the line or above the line? How does this affect decisions on retirement? This is the information I was given from that company. They gave me the data of the biological ages for each chronological age. And if you're 35, chronologically, difference is not that high. But if you reach this age, there's not much difference, because if you're very high, you don't reach that age. But here, when you're retired, it's bigger. Retirement age. What does this mean? If you see someone and you know they're 60, and you see, I don't see that they're 60. Well, they're not 60. They are not 60. Biological age. This can be your life, or my life. I was 35. I think I was very healthy, fit. I was below the line. Then I got married. I had children. Stress from life. I went to the doctors, and he said, Moshe, it's not horrible. Your biological age is here. Can I do anything? Well, I do exercise, and I moved here, and something bad happened, and then it went up. This is life. Biological age goes up and down. Chronological age is clockwork. I'm going to speak very fast because I don't have much time. I can give you a formula for your biological age. This is the last and only formula today. Your biological age, BA, is chronological age plus things, many things. Those things, do you want them to be positive or negative? I want my biological age to be lower, so I want those things to be negative. What am I including there? Like 70 things, I was told. 70 things that affect. For example, if your chronological age is 55 and the item in brackets is 10, then your biological age is 65. I don't want that. I want less. I want negative numbers in the formula. So how's this related to retirement? There's a famous professor in the US, Howard Chudyk. He wrote a book, How Old Are You? He said many years ago the notion of chronological age is a new thing. We didn't know our age, and the identification with our age has changed through time. He says that birthdays and birthday cards, this started this thing of knowing, oh, today I'm 62, yesterday I was 61. And this is interesting. The difference between chronological and biological age can be 20 years. What's more important for a pension system, chronological or biological age? How much you need to save? have a world tomorrow in the future where everyone identifies with biological age, what are the implications? Yes, with time, my age is going to change. You know that at the end of the 18th century, what happened? The pension system that was introduced in England, well, there was a debate on the age that was going to be used. And the idea there was that it didn't have to be chronological age. I checked the documents and there's a discussion in 1908. They said everyone is going to retire at 65. Are they going to receive an amount of money for the rest of their life at 65? Why do we have to pick up this number? It's just the number of times you turned around the sun. 100 years ago, they said, okay, we have to go on a case-by-case basis. Can you work? Can you not work? But that's impossible. It was impossible to do 100 years ago, but perhaps today we can. Perhaps. Japan has the highest retirement age in the world. In Russia, they want to change it. Putin wants to change it. He doesn't want 65. He wants 62. Because they have this number in their minds. 62, 65, 67, but it's all chronological. In Japan, if you're 75, it's like someone aged 55 in Russia. Why are they paying attention to chronological age? These are numbers I computed. What's your age if you're 50-year-old? If you're 50, but you live in Italy, no, your biological age is like 52. If you're 50 years old, but you live in Russia, your chronological age is like 60 odd years. This is instead of life expectancy. Okay, your life expectancy is 20, this other person is 15. Expectancy is the future. What do you know about my future? What do you know? Your age is not 62. Come back here when you're 62. Now you're 50. That's different. This is a debate going on around the world. My life expectancy is lower. Why should I wait? Biological age. Let's finish. Final message. I promised it was going to be 40 minutes. Pay-as-go system is unsustainable. I don't know why we have to remind people, but that's it. People have forgotten. It's not sustainable. Second, economic level, not amount of money. It's not amount of money in a pension system. If the language is money, they're going to think about, oh, if I have an emergency, I can withdraw money. You have to translate it into consumption units. In the US, they're doing that. There's an act that was passed a few months ago in 401k, which is the document each American citizen receives when they receive the account, the value of their account. They need two figures. One, the amount of figure they have, yes. Second, the consumption you're going to receive when you retire, a number per year. And historically, that's how people measured wealth. It was not how much money you have. The units you're going to receive. The units. And the last idea, the age at which they cannot work is not fixed. I think that if we speak about biological age instead of chronological age, we can reduce inequality a little bit. Okay, yes, I understand. Your true age is not 60, it's like 70. Okay, let's change the act, change the law, and you can do this. This is speculation, of course. Thank you for your patience and your patience with my Spanish, of course.